Our economy is growing again for the first time in more than a year, and we know that economic growth is a prerequisite for job growth. But having said that, what I emphasize today is we cannot sit back and be satisfied given the extraordinarily high unemployment levels that we've seen.
Well, jobs are clearly on President Obama's mind, so is another jobs bill on the way from Congress. Democratic Senator Dick Durbin said on Meet the Press yesterday that refocusing on jobs was the reason Obama is pushing to wrap up health care quickly.
Both the President and the Congress want to shift this from this critically important issue, which is central to our economy, to the economy and jobs. We want to really get this done. We've spent a year at it, but we've got to really refocus our attention, all of our attention, on getting people back to work.
So can we afford it, and is a jobs bill really the best way to create employment? We're back to our panel: David Goodfriend, Jimmy P, Robert Reich and Steve Forbes. Robert, you're a former Labour Secretary. If you were there in the Obama camp now, would you be pushing for yet another, a second job stimulus bill?
I would be, definitely, Simon. And there would be three particular pieces to it. Number one, I would say let's get money to small businesses, because small businesses do, in fact, provide most jobs. They have a hard time now getting credit. Number two, a one-year payroll tax holiday on the first $20,000 of income. That's good for workers. That's also good for employers. And number three, I would say let's have a WPA or a CCC-style direct jobs program. Now, all of that in addition to a second stimulus plan.
Jimmy P, do you think it's a good idea?
Well, first of all, listen, we're going to get some sort of stimulus plan. My sources tell me what we're looking at basically is something along the lines of a 3-year, $300 billion plan. That's going to have some of the things that Bob said. It's probably going to have some aid to state and local governments, maybe a job investment tax credit, maybe a little bit more infrastructure spending. Listen, I think we have some long-term structural problems with this economy, so I'm more in favor of long-term answers. You could start by perhaps lowering our corporate tax rate to 0 and also lowering capital gains tax. That'd be a good start.
There's no way that's going to happen. That's cloud cuckoo land.
I don't think it actually. It's surprising that with the corporate tax, maybe with capital gains, but the corporate tax issue, there's actually quite a bit of support on both sides for dramatically lowering that rate for competitiveness reasons.
Steve, you like lower taxes, but it wouldn't come to that degree now, would it?
Well, not with this administration, which is why the economy is not going to do as well as it should. One of the first things they should do is stabilize the dollar. People say, well, that'll mean higher interest rates. Well, talk to small businesses. They can't get credit, and when they do, they pay a very, very high interest rate. So in the real economy, interest rates are very high. Larger businesses are doing okay, but job creators are having a hard time.
What about this?
And reducing tax rates,
what about this?
That's the way you do it.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Steve. What about this idea we've got from House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who's at least said that a tax on financial transactions is on the table, if not a priority at this stage, and some Democrats are talking about raising $150 billion through that. Good idea, Steve?
Of course not. They're going to tax everything. They're going to tax the right to breathe, get up in the morning, go to sleep at night, and still not going to pay for the deficits they're running up.
Oh, come on, Steve.
Listen, actually, the latest idea to pay, if they're going to try to pay for the stimulus package, is not necessarily this transaction tax, but to repeal those Bush tax cuts, at least on wealthier Americans, repeal them a year early, make it retroactive to the start of 2010, which is an idea that Clinton did back in 1993.
Is that right, Robert? Refresh our memories.
I honestly don't think that there's going to be any tax increase at all this coming year. The focus is going to be on job creation. There's not going to be very much worry this coming year about deficits, because, again, you want to stimulate the economy. Yeah, and government is the spender.
They are concerned about
deficits. Can I jump in here for a second?
They are concerned about deficits.
I have to ask, because we've got some great economists and business people on here now. Let's talk some facts. There's a difference between a cyclical budget deficit, which is what happens in a recession with lower revenues and more people out of work and higher government expenditures, and a structural budget deficit, which is a deficit at full employment. Right now, clearly, we're not at full employment. Everybody agrees with that. Unemployment's at historical highs. We are undergoing a cyclical deficit of large proportions, and that actually helps it. I mean,
we have a long-term structural deficit in this country, probably about 7 percentage points of GDP, 18 revenue, 25 spending. We're up to about $1 trillion. Tell me how we're going to close it.
I'll tell you
we want to deal with the structural deficit. Everybody says that. I mean, there's no question about that. A lot of it has to do with entitlements, but you don't want to do it now. You don't want to do anything that reduces demand now.
Listen, create some fiscal space for some of this stuff. Put a reasonable plan to deal with this long-term structural issue now, and that'll clear some fiscal space to do some of the stuff I would like to see done now, like tax cuts.
Well, I think they certainly need to do it on entitlements. And again, I take a different view on health care. I think health care cost push has been a huge problem for Medicare. I think if you get control of those health care costs, and I think the bills
doesn't do it, though.
The only way government gets control of health care costs is by rationing it. They don't know how to create health care. Medicare already and Medicaid cost shift $90 billion onto private patients. And in terms of a so-called public option, which is a government-run health insurance company, we saw what Fannie and Freddie did to destroy the housing market. Why in the world would we want to not?
That's how foreign countries do it. Lots of regulation, lots of rationing.
Simon, if I could just make one point about this, and it's very important. I want to correct the record on Senator Bond because, you know, unless Republicans are willing to say we do not any longer trust the Congressional Budget Office, which I think is quite a statement for Republicans, they've got to go along with the CBO estimates, and the CBO says that this thing coming out of the Senate is going to cost less than $900 billion over 10 years, and it's going to pay for itself. In fact, it will be a surplus.
But health care spending increases. Health care spending increases overall. You may pay for it with your phony cuts, but healthcare spending increases. That's the bottom line.
But look, if either you agree with the CBO and you say that they are nonpartisan and it's not phony cuts, or you say that it's all phony and we're all going to make up our own numbers.
Come on. The spending is all backloaded. Give me a break.
Now, look, we came on to talk about jobs. I think we should bring this back to jobs. That's what the elections are going to be about next year. That's what Congress is focusing on. It's about jobs.
The bottom line here is, do we take the Carter approach, which is a weak dollar and higher taxes, or the Reagan approach, lower tax rates and a stable, strong dollar?
That's
what's going to be
the Reagan deficits?
The latter approach, the one that revolutionized our economy for the last generation and basically saved Western civilization. I like that idea, Steve.
I thought it was the one that drove us into deficits and debts that we couldn't pay until Clinton became
during the 1980s, the national debt, thanks to defense spending, went up $1.7 trillion. The nation's wealth, household wealth, went up net $17 trillion. I'll take that trade-off anytime.
Steve Forbes, you are wrong about the dollar. A lower dollar will create more jobs because it makes American products more competitive.
When Robert has a lower dollar ever created jobs? Get rid of the theory. Give me a real-life example.
Gentlemen, it's been fantastic to talk to you all. I hope you have a very pleasant night. Thank you for joining us here on the Kudlow Report.
Thank you.
That's Mark Walsh, Jimmy P, and Robert Reich, and indeed Steve Forbes.